Hello, and a very warm welcome to another episode of JKAC UK Conversations. This is a platform where we engage with a diverse range of voices, including authors, activists, politicians, subject matter experts, and many other stakeholders connected to Jammu and Kashmir, all in a pursuit of developing a well rounded and nuanced understanding of the region, its history, its people, and the issues that continue to shape its future. In recent times here in the UK, we have witnessed repeated demonstrations by members of the Mirpuri diaspora, including protests outside the Pakistani High Commission in London and marches across several British cities. These protests have emerged in response to reports of violent crackdowns by Pakistani authorities in Mirpur and Muzaffarabad. According to various reports, hundreds of people have been killed or injured over time. There have been reports of use of excessive force by Pakistani authorities, arbitrary arrest, and even communication blackouts. Some protests have also been calling for greater autonomy or independence for Pakistan. Now, for many people unfamiliar with the history and complexities of the region, a number of questions arise. Why are these protests taking place? What are the grievances of the people? What exactly are they demanding? And of course, the Pakistani state's response to these developments. To help us unpack these questions and provide historical and cultural context, I'm delighted to be joined today by Manu Khajuria. She's a writer, a speaker, and founder of Voice of Dogras, an organization dedicated to preserving and promoting the history, culture, and identity of the Dogra community who are from the Jammu region. Manu has been a passionate advocate for her homeland. She has persistently worked to amplify underrepresented stories of Jammu, its rich history, the legacy of the Dogra dynasty, its traditions, art, and the essence of an identity that often gets overshadowed within the broader narrative of Jammu and Kashmir. In that pursuit, she has also authored the beautiful book Mountain Goddesses, Finding Feminine Power from an Unexpected Place. The book uncovers inspiring stories of feminine strength rooted in the traditions of Jammu. We are delighted to have her with us today as we explore the concerning developments in Mirpur-Muzaffarabad, and also we are looking to examine the historical and cultural realities that have influenced the region's present-day dynamics. Welcome, Manu. Before we turn to contemporary developments, I would kind of like to set the scene for our listeners. Here in London, we frequently hear about Mirpur-Muzaffarabad, and many people from these regions describe themselves as Kashmiri. However, for many who are not from the region, there is often very little understanding of who these people are and where these places fit historically. So could you help us unpack that, and like where are Mirpur-Muzaffarabad located? What role did they play within the former princely state of Jammu and Kashmir? And if you can tell us about the languages, ethnic identities, and cultural traditions that define these communities.
Thank you, Shweta, and thank you, JKAC UK. I think you've started with a very, very important question here, and it sort of sets the context to what is happening today and what happened after 1947, October 1947. So if we look at the Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir area, it's what at the moment it's divided into three divisions. There is a southern part, a central part, and a northern part. And the southern part is what is known as Mirpur. And within Mirpur, there is a Kotli and there is Bhimber as well. So southern part, the southernmost of the southern part is Mirpur district. And that is very close to the Pakistani Punjab area. And just above that is your Kotli. And then there is Bhimber. I would say largely this is mainland Jammu. So you will see similarities as far as geography goes, landscape goes. It's a hilly area, it's forested or used to be forested. There is another element to what is happening to the forest there, which we will touch upon later. And then there is, of course, Bhimber. Bhimber was, again, it was a part of the Bhimber Punch larger area. Then the central area is Punch, which is similar to, or rather a part of what is our Punch, on this side of Jammu and Kashmir in India. And you have Haveli, you have Bagh, and you have Sudnoti in this central area. And then finally, you have the northern part, which is what I would say is the Kashmir part of POJK. So both the southern and the central part are mainland Jammu, and hence we, usually refer to it as POJK to um, understand the diversity, or the characteristic of this region. So the northern part is the Kashmir part, which is Muzaffarabad, Neelam Valley, and the Hatia Bala area. So these are the three areas within the northernmost part. And of course, Muzaffarabad is the capital of the so-called Azad Jammu and Kashmir, or POJK. So this entire, so it's like a long strip. And if you see how it sits, is that for POJK on its east, it's sitting near the Indo-Pak LOC, the line of control. Towards south, you have the Pakistani Punjab, especially the Rawalpindi, Islamabad area. And towards the north is the Gilgit-Baltistan, which also is a part of the, erstwhile princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. So it's actually POJKGBL, which is Gilgit-Baltistan as well. These were the northernmost areas of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. So in the Indian context, this entire area, the POJK as well as the Gilgit-Baltistan, all are an integral part of India, because according to the instrument of accession was signed on 26th October 1947, and the entire princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, which included these areas, were acceded to India. So this is the POJK GBL area, and we'll focus on POJK at the moment because the unrest is happening there, though Gilgit-Baltistan has also seen massive unrest against Pakistani occupiers. And when we look at the ethnic diversity of POJK, since that was a question you had asked, the ethnic diversity as well as the linguistic diversity can be surprising for many people. In fact, Jammu and Kashmir comes as a surprise to many people because they think of it as a homogeneous area, but it's not. And same goes for POJK, because you have people who largely today call themselves Pahadis or Mirpuris. In United Kingdom, we refer to them as Mirpuris, but they are basically Pahadi people. A little bit of Kashmiri ethnicity is there, but again, that's limited to the northernmost part, which I had touched upon earlier, Muzaffarabad, Neelam Valley, more in Neelam Valley and Hatia Bala. And rest, they're all Pahadi, Potohari people who, and then again, they're divided into Gujars. So you have the Gujars, you have the Jats, you have what is known as, they refer to themselves as Rajputs, or the Muslim Rajputs, who I would say are, mostly Dogras. And then you have the Sudan tribes. So various tribes. Again, these are tribes, when you talk to a POJK, they'll say the Sudans converted from Hinduism to Islam. So there's a Sudan tribe, but that's the case with the Rajputs as well, and the Jats and the Gujars of this area. So hence the languages spoken here are merely, if we can just largely label them as Pahadi Potohari. These are the language, besides Gojri, which is a language spoken by the Gujars. Again, a lot of Gujar community will be found in the northern part of POJK. So the ethnic Kashmiri identity is very little and is limited to the northernmost part. The rest is, that is why culturally also and linguistically also, it is closer to mainland Jammu, Punch and Rajouri, especially parts of Punch and Rajouri. And that's where actually the similarity with Kashmir ends. But it's more like an mainland Jammu, mainland Punch and Rajouri. That is what POJK is. That is what the ethnicity is. That is what the language you will hear in this area.
Oh, that is so revealing. What you've just shared is like, and surprisingly, many in the world will not be, aware of the fact that, Mirpur, Kotli, Bhimber, they are actually historically Jammu, and they, like you just mentioned, they have their own, Pahari, Potwari, and closer to Dogra identities. And I guess the moment you acknowledge that, a lot of uncomfortable questions might follow, because I guess historically it's also had a substantial Hindu and Sikh population. But that is the nature of the problem there. A lot, because it is named Kashmir, and then the international narrative and policy discussions become Kashmir centric, and these regions and the realities of these regions go under represented. So, just coming to the contemporary times. So, if you could, tell us specifically about, with regards to the current protests, what are the underlying grievances that are driving people onto the streets? And I mentioned earlier, there have been reports of the response of the Pakistani authorities, which have been heavy-handed. They involved arrests, restrictions on assembly, use of force against demonstrators. So if you can shed some light on these developments, how serious are the concerns and what do they reveal about the state of civil liberties and human rights in the region?
Yeah, Shweta, what is very interesting is that this area, Pakistan likes to call it Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Azad meaning free Jammu and Kashmir, whereas it's the opposite of free because there are no civil liberties. There is very limited autonomy, hardly any, because it's controlled by the Pakistani military state, and there is hardly any freedom. What has been interesting over the years, because ever since it was illegally occupied by Pakistan, this has been the state. What the difference, where the difference is coming is that now with the, with social media especially, the people of Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir also have realized that they've been fooled for decades now. So there was this simmering discontent because there was absolutely no political empowerment, anyways. In 1974, they had an AJK interim constitutional act, which effectively said that anybody, any individual, or any political party in so called Azad Jammu and Kashmir could not oppose the idea or the accession of this POJK area, this area to Pakistan. So they could not oppose any sort of, they could not oppose Pakistan. They could not ask for independence. They could not talk about it. That was made illegal. So basically, effectively saying that, you can't stand up against Pakistan. Besides that, what was very interesting was that there was a lot of confusion about identity in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I say this because from my personal experience, after coming to United Kingdom, after meeting the POJK or the Mirpuri diaspora, I realized that they were on purpose told that, you are Kashmiri. They were asked to forget that they are part of mainland Jammu, because on one hand, Pakistan was radicalizing and exporting terror into the Kashmir Valley and creating this unrest against India, and then telling its POJK or Azad Jammu and Kashmir population that, listen, this, you are Kashmiri and there is some unrest happening against India in Kashmir, or the Indian administered Kashmir. So your ideology is similar. These are your people, and this is what you should also stand up against. So kept them kept them fooled for a very long time that there is an issue on the other side as well. And interestingly, when I came here, one of the POJKians asked me that, how come nobody from mainland Jammu is talking about us? Because, after all, we are mainland Jammu. I said, because we do not identify with your issues. You have talked about some so-called problems in our area where none exist. And then with the advent of social media or explosion of social media, when Pakistani media couldn't control the narrative, POJKians began to compare the infrastructure, the development, the robustness of the democratic institutions in our Jammu and Kashmir compared to what is POJK. And that's when the simmering unrest, started sort of boiling over. And what we are seeing recently, it's not just one or a standalone unrest or a movement or a long march. This has been happening for some years, from some, I would say, a decade, because 2013 was when Arif Shahid was killed. He was an activist who was killed by what is reported as ISI. So anybody who would oppose Pakistan and would oppose the disempowerment of its people was either brutally killed or was silenced, etc. So the recent protests are just in the long line of simmering discontent in POJK, because what they are asking for are some very basic rights like infrastructure, like roads and healthcare, hospitals. Basically, they don't have too many hospitals. If there are hospitals, there isn't any medicine, or it's not staffed with doctors. Dialysis centers are not working. Roads, the condition is so bad that they've become like these cart roads, cutting off villages, so many villages. Electricity is such a big issue because 22-hour long power outages are happening there, despite the fact that there is a hydroelectric station there in on Neelam and Jhelum rivers, as well as the Mangala Dam was built because of this. But they feel that all their resources are being used for Pakistan's Punjab, which is, if you look at the state of Pakistan right now, it's an extension of similar discontent in Balochistan or Sindh or the northwest frontier provinces. So this has been happening for a long time. Then the recent issues of these 12 seats which are reserved for so-called refugees from this AJK, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, who are living elsewhere. So when you speak to a Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir person, he will tell you that these 12 seats are actually, it's just an excuse for the Pakistani military state to control what will happen in POJK, because usually these 12 seats are occupied by ISI nominated persons, so that they can control whatever is happening in POJK. So they've been asking for a rollback of these reserved seats. Then there is also an issue of 25% quota. So these 25% quota, again, for refugees in education and in jobs, if you talk to POJKians, they will tell you are again being used by ISI to give it to people who they can then place in these various important institutions and agencies within Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and control. For example, I was told recently by somebody from Bhimber that the current SSP of Mirpur is actually, again, one of those 25% quotas seat person who's not a local, who is being used to suppress any kind of resistance in POJK. Similarly, another example was given that there is this position in POJK, which is the Wazir of Janglat, basically a forest officer. So he controls the forest, and they were saying that during the Dogra rule, during Maharaja Hari Singh, this entire area had almost 60 to 70% was forest area. Now it's been reduced to 3%. So the trees are being cut and their forest resources are being depleted, and everything is going to Pakistan, Punjab. So these 12 seats, this 25% quota is also something that they're asking for. So something like subsidized rates for atta, for flour, for basic needs like this is what, there's a 38 point charter, but these are some of the basic things that they are fighting for. And the situation is really bad. You had asked that what is the situation currently. It's really bad because there's been a complete communication blackout. Internet has been shut off. People have been arrested. Hundreds have been injured. I believe somewhere between 40 to 50 people have been killed, activists. And even in the United Kingdom, we've seen the British MPs have written a letter to the Foreign Secretary asking for these concerns to be raised for de-escalation of what is happening in POJK. And I think 60 MPs have signed that letter. And there have been protests in London also. Just this Sunday, there was a massive protest in London where this diaspora from POJK, Mirpuri diaspora, as they are commonly referred to, they came out. And of course, there is a Joint Awami Action Committee, which is like a civil society group, which is leading these protests. And they have been proscribed. So they've been declared as terrorists. And anybody who's speaking, and there is this POJK in United Kingdom who's also been declared a terrorist by the Pakistani military state, because he's been raising his voice against what is happening in POJK. Because we must remember that most of this global diaspora, and especially the diaspora in Pakistan, in United Kingdom, has roots back in Mirpur. So their families are attacked. If they speak here, their families are being attacked. So situation is pretty bad. If the injured are being taken to the hospital, the police is coming there, the rangers are coming there, the treatment is not being allowed to happen. By recent news reports or the recent reports that have come out from POJK, food trucks, essential supplies have been stopped. They're not being allowed to enter POJK, so that people start facing this whole issue of basic items not reaching them, like food and medicine, etc. Women have been arrested in Muzaffarabad, and treatment is not being allowed to those who are being injured. And in fact, according to a recent report, the police officers who are local, who refuse to fire, shoot at the protesters, were shot by the rangers for not doing so. So absolutely, horrendous things are happening. Absolutely brutal crackdown, and very, very serious concern this is. And I hope the humanitarian organizations all across the world take it up, because the situation is really, really grim.
Wow, what you've just shared is so appalling. And like you said, over the past few years, we have actually repeatedly seen these protests and, unrest emerge from these regions and, inadequate medical infrastructure, restricted education opportunities. Yeah, this could definitely be the reason. But most importantly, what you just mentioned, that, while the region has a so-called elected listed assembly and a formal system of local government, but most of the administrative and financial powers remained they remain outside of the region, and the Pakistani machinery has significant influence over the administrative affairs. So the democratic rights of the population and the freedom of speech evidently is curtailed. Now,
And I'll just like to add to that, Shweta, that since 2024, Pakistan celebrates. All of it is a sham, of course, but Pakistan sort of celebrates or marks 5th February as Kashmir Solidarity Day, where they pretend to stand with people of POJK. But since 2024, POJKians have started doing a strike call on 5th February. So they have clearly seen through this act of the Pakistani military state, their false promises, and the sham that the Azad or the free Jammu and Kashmir is. It's completely controlled by Pakistan.
wow. So I think social media has helped in certain way, getting some of
Absolutely.
this truth out. And, you have been such an active member. You have been so active on social media, and you have also raised, this concern over social media. And you've also had an interesting episode, which you would like to hear about that. And you had mentioned that around 50 UK MPs, they have written to the UK Foreign Office, I believe, raising concerns about the developments happening there. So if you can shed some light on that as well, it'll be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, starting with my own personal experience, because as I said, I am in touch with the POJK diaspora who have been protesting not only here in the United Kingdom, but also in Europe, in Belgium, in Germany, and also in Washington, D.C., in the US. So I've been talking to these people. And it's not just now. I've been connected to them over more than a decade now, just because there is this cultural similarity, which I touched upon earlier. There is a shared history, because they do agree that Maharaja Hari Singh was a very good king. They admire Maharaja Gulab Singh, the founder of the Jambal dynasty. So there have been these common grounds where we have been able to speak. The language is similar. I speak Dogri. The Pahadi Potohari is similar to Dogri. It's another sister language. So I've been in touch with them. They have been talking to me through over these decades. And hence, when the recent unrest that we are seeing, which is like a massive unrest in POJK, they were requesting me to at least share this or spread awareness of what is happening in POJK. And I felt, yes, I should share. And I was tweeting. I used the social media platform X to express my socio-political opinions. So I was just sharing about what is happening in POJK, and then I get an email from X saying that the Pakistani Telecom Authority, so basically the Pakistani government, is has informed them that I have broken their law. I have broken some Pakistani law by sharing the truth, essentially the sharing the truth of what is happening in POJK. So X, of course, did not take down those tweets of mine, because they said they believed in freedom of expression, but they wanted to inform me that I have broken a law, Pakistani law, and if I wanted, I could take legal counsel, etc. So yeah, that was very, and I was thinking, here I am. I'm not a Pakistani citizen. I am not somebody who's from Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, thankfully. And I am not residing, in POJK. I'm residing in the United Kingdom. And still, the Pakistani military state can issue such diktats. Just imagine what they must be doing to people who are living there. They, of course, threaten the Mirpuri, the POJK diaspora by, conducting raids in their homes back in POJK, and of course threatening them or threatening their family members back in POJK, because so many POJKians come up and say that we can't say this and we need your help to tell the world what is happening, because we've got family back home. And you must have seen there are videos on X where the rangers have gone into homes, violated the privacy and sanctity of these homes, and where women and children are, of course, have also been intimidated. And these are homes of these diaspora members. So imagine if they can shoot off an email to me, or declare that I've broken a Pakistani law. It's terrible for those people who are living there as well as the diaspora. So that is one thing. And then, of course, coming to the British parliamentarians, many of whom, the Pakistani, it's very interesting. The Pakistani population, the British Pakistanis, almost 60 to 70% are basically POJKians. They are from Mirpur area. So you have the, what's his name? Imtiaz Hussain. He is the Labour MP from Bradford. And he was the one who wrote this letter asking for a de-escalation, because obviously he's got roots here in Mirpur. And then from what I understand, it was initially 50, but I think it's 60 MPs. It can be double checked, but I think now its total is coming to 60 MPs who have signed this letter expressing concern over what is happening in POJK. Interestingly, he also chairs the APPG for Kashmir, which up until now has just peddled the same fake narrative against India on Jammu and Kashmir, which has never had any room for any minorities, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist minorities of Jammu and Kashmir. It has never had any space, because ever since I've been in the United Kingdom, I have raised this. I've said, why can't we be a part of this? This is our story. What you are peddling is fake. And I've always been stonewalled. And I think Kashmiri Pandits, Dogra Hindus or Dogra Muslims, nationalist Gujars, Pahadis from our part of Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian Jammu and Kashmir, they've been completely kept out of this APPG for Kashmir. So it's a very interesting, or rather I would say unfortunate, but an interesting turn of events that now this APPG for Kashmir is now raising concerns that there is a severe crackdown in POJK by the Pakistani establishment.
Wow, how the tides have turned, they say. And I believe that, in response to the letter from the UK MPs, the Pakistani, government has also issued a letter. They are kind of miffed that, such kind of statements have come from the UK, some of the UK MPs. They cite non-interference, and they ask the British government to actually educate them. So that is a very interesting development that has happened. My question is, you mentioned that you have been in touch with the Mirpuri, diaspora, and there are quite a few of them here in the UK. So, and they are apparently the largest overseas communities from that region here in the UK. And they also have a very interesting, history of how they came in such large numbers. So if you can just shed some light on that, and and how, what is the diaspora, the Mirpuri diaspora, planning to do apart from, taking onto the streets, if you have any information regarding that?
Yeah, so the Mirpuri diaspora, the diaspora from POJK, have had a very interesting history and how they came into United Kingdom. So they were there, some of them were there from maybe the before 1940s as well, because they were here for, I believe, maritime, they were involved in boat making, etc. Then in the 1940s, some of them came here and they were in the ammunition industry. Interestingly, for the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, the ammunition supplier was Rawalpindi earlier. So they came here, but the largest wave of Mirpuris came when the Mangala Dam was constructed in the 1960s, and it led to the submerging of a very, very big area, which affected 100,000 people and almost submerged 485 villages. And that is when Pakistan, a lot of Mirpuris came into United Kingdom. So I think the if you have to point to that one wave when they came in such large numbers, was when Mangala Dam was constructed and a very large area was submerged. And having said that, it's important to point out here that Pakistan has always treated this area as a colony. So it has only extracted resources from this region, which is a very resource-rich region. As I told you, this POJKian was telling me that 60% was a forested area. Now it's come down to 3%, and minerals are being taken from this area. Mangala Dam was created for hydroelectric power generation, but that electricity is going to Pakistan, Punjab. and there is no electricity in POJK itself. So they are not the beneficiaries of whatever is being built here. It all funnels to Pakistan, Punjab. So that is how the POJK diaspora, Mirpuri diaspora came here, of course. And from what I understand is that they are, you know, especially this unrest, the last 10 days, 15 days, that what we are seeing, what is happening in POJK, this has really, really angered them. The kind of sloganeering that we've heard in front of Pakistani High Commission, I don't think so in the last 10 years we've heard that kind of a sentiment coming out. They always called the Pakistani army Dehshatgard, um, because they said ki those who wear uniform, so men in uniform, the Pakistani army has been Dehshatgard or terrorist. But this time they have, the sloganeering is even more full of anger and directed towards the Pakistani military establishment, the Rangers, the Pakistani police, Asim Munir. So the anger is definitely very, very, resentment is high, anger is high. And I think what they are saying is that they will support their families back home in POJK. They will support all the activists of Joint Awami Action Committee, and they will do whatever they can. So from sending money into POJK to help these people, to raising concerns, or highlighting to the global media, to the various world governments of what is happening. I think they stand in solidarity with their homeland, of course, and they will do whatever it takes.
Yeah, and do you think the international community and human rights organization, they're getting sufficient attention from them? So what is happening there? Would you have some insight?
No, I don't think they're getting enough attention, because if it was the other way around, so when fake narrative is peddled against India in terms of, in the context of Jammu and Kashmir, it's picked up by everyone. So the silence of those people who have always spoken about the rights of Kashmir and what is happening in Kashmir, it's pretty clear. I mean, in a way, I'm glad this has happened, because it shows the hypocrisy, the duplicity of these activists who seem to be in solidarity, or who have always pretended to be in solidarity with Kashmir. These are the very people who have not uttered a word against the Pakistani army, Pakistani establishment, of what they are doing in POJK. So I think they stand exposed. The media is yet to pick up. There have been coverage, of course, there has been coverage, but it needs to be much, much more. It's disproportionate in terms of what is happening in POJK right now.
Wow. And my next question would then be, then what are the biggest misconceptions that people outside of Jammu and Kashmir often have? Because you say people don't have a fair understanding, and it's always that one-sided narrative that keeps getting peddled.
So I think what the biggest misunderstanding about Jammu and Kashmir, and I refer to entire Jammu and Kashmir, which includes Gilgit-Baltistan, has always been that it's been projected as one homogeneous identity, and of only a certain faith, of a certain ethnic identity. And in terms of that, everything has been then, the narrative has been framed. So it has never taken into account that essentially Jammu and Kashmir had Sanatan Hindu roots. Buddhism flourished here. It was the land of Sanskrit. It was a land of, the Sanatan rishis. It was a land of dharma. That's never ever discussed. They do not talk about how slowly this region became Islamic, or there were so many conversions, and they were not peaceful conversions. So from the Sufis who came in to the Islamic sultans that we had, some of them extremely, extremely cruel. Nobody discusses that. That context is never ever discussed. Then even if we come to the more modern times, 19th century onwards, the diversity of the region is never taken into account. So it's only Kashmir, and hence I feel that that's why the Pakistani establishment speaks only of Kashmir and never created this identity confusion even in POJK. But people don't know that there are Lamaistic Buddhists in this region. People don't know that there are Sikhs in this region, Hindus in such large numbers in Jammu. And of course, when we speak of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, or POJK as we would like to refer it, they do not talk about the total annihilation of the Hindu and Sikh population here. So, for somebody like me who's from Jammu, who's a Dogra from Jammu and Kashmir, I find it very troubling that there is no acknowledgement of what happened to the Hindu and Sikh population in POJK. How come there is not a single Hindu and Sikh remaining in this region? Whereas Jammu and Kashmir continues to, the Indian Jammu and Kashmir continues to be a Muslim majority state or a union territory of India. So I think this is the biggest misconception. We do not understand the ethnicities, the diversity of ethnicities. In fact, somebody joked that it could have been a continent. If you just look at the size, it's the size of United Kingdom or larger, the erstwhile princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. And the diversity in languages and ethnicity is so much that it could have been a continent in itself. And then you pick just a few and say that this is the aspiration or this is the belief of the entire state. It is misinformation. It is you are peddling a fake narrative. That is how you build that. But I'm glad that social media is here now, so all of these voices are coming out. The unrest in Gilgit Baltistan is known to all. The massive unrest that we are seeing in POJK is known to all. The fact that the Jammu and Kashmir in India is progressing, its democratic institutions are flourishing, there is so much development in terms of roads, and even in terms of education, you have IITs and you have IIMs, and tourism is flourishing. That comparison can be seen now. So I think that misconception is breaking, and the governance, even at the panchayati level, you have the DDC elections that Jammu and Kashmir saw. At the smallest unit, there is so much democracy. So this misconception that it's just Kashmir and it's just that one small group of radicalized who are proxies of the Pakistani military state, the other ones, whatever they think applies to everyone, and that is how the entire state is thinking. I think that has been the biggest misconception, and it's being busted. It's being busted now, and now by the people of POJK themselves.
Absolutely. What you just talked about, the widespread use of that term Kashmir kind of restricts the whole entire to just Kashmir, which just comprises of about 7% of that land, I believe. So that is quite unfortunate because then, that has been used to inaccurately, talk about territories of all the princely, that the former princely state had. So that is some of the glaring consequence of the name misappropriation. Now you come from Jammu, okay, and it sees time and again surge in terrorist activities, and unfortunately, it is because of the camps and the terrorist camps and infrastructure that exists in the POJK region, in the Mirpur-Muzaffarabad region, and that Operation Sindoor actually highlighted that. So, what do you have to say to that? How Pakistan uses that land. So, what do you have to say to that?
Yes, as a native of Jammu and Kashmir and from mainland Jammu area, of course, it has been extremely frustrating and to see time and again so many terrorist incidents happening in our region, be it Kashmir or be it Jammu. The kind of massacres that we've seen, and I've been talking a lot about this, that Jammu region has seen certainly more massacres of the minorities, Hindu minorities especially, than the Kashmir Valley. And that has happened because of the export of terror that Pakistan has been indulging in since 1947. I mean, from the time when Sikh and Hindu population in POJK were totally annihilated, to rapes of hundreds of women, abduction of women, it's continued. So you've had the Prankot massacres, you've had so many massacres in Udhampur and in Kishtawar, the more remote hilly areas of Jammu, because the Jammu region has bigger forest cover. It's got, the terrain is very difficult. So you have the mountains, because Kashmir is valley, but Jammu has these high mountains, forest cover, and dense vegetation. And that's where the infiltration has happened across the LOC, of course. And then not just terrorism, the ceasefire violations along the international border and LOC in Jammu region and in Kashmir has been so disruptive. There has been no stability. There's been a state of conflict always. So Pakistan has left no stone unturned to keep this region unstable. So the people of Jammu and Kashmir want peace, they want progress, they want development, and that is why you see a happy Kashmir, a happy Jammu on our side. And yet Pakistan has continued, and to think that they have illegally occupied Pakistan via the area of POJK, they have not only illegally occupied our territory, but they are using that territory as terror launch pads, because that's where their training camps are. Since the late 1989 90s, the whole period you saw, they were 14-year-old Kashmiri Muslim boys would be taken across the border, they would be trained, radicalized, sent back into our Jammu and Kashmir to commit terror activities. This has been continuing for so long now. So as a Jammu and Kashmir person from Jammu and Kashmir, you feel like there has to be an end to this. This cannot continue. They cannot, export terror. Ceasefire violations. I come from a border village in Jammu district, and we've seen ceasefire violations where children have been killed, where livelihoods have been destroyed. Narco terrorism is happening thanks to Pakistan. They're using that now. So, and then of course there was the Operation Gibraltar. If we go back, Operation Gibraltar in 1965, what was the aim? Again, the same idea was, you get into Jammu and Kashmir, you infiltrate, you create an uprising against the Indian government, because people are happy, so they're always looking for ways. So from the most recent Pahalgam massacre to Operation Gibraltar in 65, or what happened with the with Waziris and Afridis from Waziristan entering, the Lashkars that came into Jammu and Kashmir and invaded, the first invasion, it's been non-stop. And I would like to see an end. I would like POJK to be Azad, Jammu and Kashmir to be actually Azad, to be free from the Pakistani occupation. A reunification of the entire princely state, because even the Indian Parliament has passed that resolution in 1994 that these are our territories and it is our aim to bring them back. So I stand with that resolution. That is what I would like to see happen.
Absolutely. I mean, the long-term implications of allowing this terrorist infrastructure is definitely very concerning, and the Indian government has consistently maintained that the entire Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. Now, you mentioned about Operation Gibraltar, so just a question just quickly came to me that uh, the border regions near the regions near LOC, like the Cham regions, there were some Hindus again who were displaced from their land, and you talked about nobody talks about those Hindus. So I believe about 150,000 Hindus and Sikhs have been displaced from that region. So if you can also talk a little bit about that.
Yes, nobody talks about the displacement of the Hindus during these wars, from 65, 71. Nobody speaks of that. There was so many killings happened even then, and there is no attention to it, as if it's almost as if, as I, what I told in the beginning, it's almost there has been a concerted effort to show that there is a homogeneous identity, and there is this whole in the context of the oppressor and the oppressed, it is the Muslim communities of Jammu and Kashmir who are the oppressed, and the oppressor is the Hindu community, and which is very weird, because the Hindu community or the Sikh community or the Buddhist community are the minority communities of Jammu and Kashmir, but they have neither the minority status or an acknowledgement of their all the things that have happened to them, the displacement, not just during the Cham Jodia incident, but also afterwards. Like for example, Prankot massacre, the people who were forced to migrate from the hills, they are living in Riyasi district now, and they don't have nobody talks about them. Their stories have not come out. So there has been a very skewed narrative about Jammu and Kashmir, where this has not been discussed at all, or the stories have not come out at all. Only now they're coming out.
Yeah, yes, I believe, social media will slowly uncover some of these facts, and they will dominate the narratives peddled by inimical
In
forces.
fact, in fact, Shweta, I would like to say, because when we said about narratives, I was reminded that in 2016 in POJK, 16 books were banned. Okay, so by the Pakistani government, the Pakistani state banned 16 books, because one is this fake narrative against India, which is peddled to the world. But the other was that fake narratives were peddled to the people of Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir as well. So they do not know their history. They do not know exactly what has happened. They do not know who they are. And when, like, as I told you, the gentleman asked me that why isn't mainland Jammu speaking of us? And we're like, you have to start acknowledging that Jammu and Kashmir on the Indian side is very happy and their aspirations are different, and they have no idea of this. We have members of the POJK diaspora who cannot go back to POJK. As I told you recently, one has been declared a terrorist. I mean, who was protesting recently. I forget his name, but he's somewhere from the West Midlands. They do not know what took place or what happened in 1947. They've just been fed a certain narrative that India is the oppressor, it is the Hindu who is the oppressor, which is so far from the truth. Because Jammu and Kashmir continues to, even during the Dogra rule, it continued to be it was a Muslim majority princely state. Even under the, after 1947, under the Indian state, it remains a Muslim majority state. It speaks of the rights that the Muslims enjoy in Jammu and Kashmir, and also the rest of India for that matter. So the narrative has been completely controlled, but it's fast, it's falling. It's like I think Pakistan is not only losing control of Balochistan, Sindh, and its northern provinces, but has probably done worse in POJK. It's lost complete control. So maybe we will see some resolution, some temporary resolution, but I think, or I expect, that there is going to be further trouble in this region. People will stand up. They were, I remember this slogan that they were using during these protests. They said, timber ki zameen hai. Timber is this tree which grows in this area in mainland Jammu, and we even make a chutney out of this timber. But it's basically a thorny tree. So they've been using that. So they are unarmed. The only thing they are using for protecting themselves is this timber ki lakdi, which is a thorny, lakdi. And I think they will rise up. Even if they reach some resolution, they're going to rise up even more ferociously after this.
Well, we definitely hope that, the basic human rights and the other things that they have been deprived of, they get to see some of that, and they get to experience living in a truly democratic state in some time in the future. And we hope better sense prevails and better times ahead. And with that, we would bring this very insightful and eye-opening conversation to a close. Thank you, Manu, for joining us today and for such an enlightening discussion and for sharing such facts with us, which is extremely essential. And you being from that region and speaking is so pertinent. So, and it is actually very crucial to understand what you just shared, and engage with the realities on the ground. Unfortunately, narratives sometimes overshadow the lived experiences, but with time and with social media, like you mentioned, slowly the truth is coming out and people have started opening their eyes. So again, we are truly grateful for your time, your insights, and your continued efforts to amplify voices and stories that are often overlooked. Thank you once again for being with us today.
Thank you.